Hi, I'm Albert Reyes. Currently, I'm doing a review on TOGAF, and I would like to share with you some of the things I've learned about this amazing framework. So, first and foremost, what is TOGAF? TOGAF is an acronym which stands for the Open Group Architecture Framework. It is a detailed method and a set of supporting tools for developing an enterprise architecture. It may be used freely by any organization wishing to develop an enterprise architecture for use within that organization. Now, this framework was developed and is developed and currently maintained by the Open Group. Okay. So this group are working within the architecture forum. But the original development of this framework, which was version 1, was way back in 1995, which was based from the Technical Architecture Framework for Information Management, or TAFIM. So this framework was originally developed by the U.S. Department of Defense, and that department gave the Open Group explicit permission and encouragement to create TOGAF by building on the TAFIM framework, which itself was the result of many years of development effort and many millions of dollars of US government investment. Okay? And to add to that, TOGAF is a framework that provides the methods and tools for assisting in the acceptance, production, use, and maintenance of an enterprise architecture. It is based on an iterative process model supported by best practices and a reusable set of existing architecture assets. Okay. Now, what kind of architecture does TOGAF deal with? There are 4 architecture domains that are commonly accepted as subsets of an overall enterprise architecture, all of which TOGAF is designed to support. There's the business architecture, which defines the business strategy, governance, organization, and key business processes. There's the data architecture, which describes the structure of an organization's logical and physical data assets and data management resources. There's the application architecture that provides a blueprint for the individual applications to be deployed, the interactions and the relationships to the core business processes of the organization. And there we have the technology architecture, which describes the logical software and hardware capabilities that are required to support the deployment of business, data, and application services. This includes IT infrastructure, middleware, network, communications, processing standards, and anything under IT. TOGAF has this characteristic or this feature, what we call the ADM, or the TOGAF architecture development method. This provides a tested and repeatable process for developing architectures. The ADM includes establishing an architecture framework, developing architecture content, transitioning, and governing the realization of architectures. Oops. All of these activities are carried out within an iterative cycle of continuous architecture definition and realization that follows organizations to transform their enterprises in a controlled manner in response to business goals and opportunities. Now, these phases within the ADM are as follows. First, we have what we call the preliminary phase, where we describe the preparation and initiation activities required to create an architecture capability, including customization of TOGAF and definition of architecture principles. Next, we have the architecture vision phase, where this describes the initial phase of an architecture development cycle. It includes information about defining the scope of the architecture development initiative, identifying the stakeholders, creating the architecture vision, and obtaining approval to proceed with the architecture development. Next, we have the business architecture, which was one of the domains I mentioned earlier. That's the next one. And from the business architecture, the next phase is the information systems architecture, which contains the data architecture and application architecture, those two architectures that were mentioned earlier. After that, we have the technology architecture. So this is where the four domains come in. And from these, from the vision down to these phases of architectures, we come to the opportunities and solutions phase, where we conduct initial implementation planning and the identification of delivery vehicles for the architecture defined in the previous phases. Then, after defining that, we go to migration planning, where we address how to move from the baseline to the target architectures by finalizing detailed implementation and migration plan. Then we move to implementation governance, where while the architecture is being implemented, this provides an architectural oversight of the implementation. Then next phase is the architecture change management, where here we establish procedures for managing change to new architecture. At the heart of this lies requirements management, where this examines the process of managing architecture requirements throughout the ADM.